Hello and welcome. Another edition of The Process, where Coach Jeremy Fouts and I spend time answering questions that come into us throughout the week, each and every week, whether it's via email, direct messages on the social media. And this seems to be the common question that's coming from parents, particularly younger families, parents that have younger student athletes that are probably freshmen through maybe juniors in high school. And that question is, and it's always the first one either of us get when we get information from parents, and that is, how do we know as parents if our student athletes are truly good enough to become a college student athlete? And I think, Jeremy, one of the things that I always try to convey to parents is that you and I approach this from the lens of not only, our field with regard to you within the nutrition and meal prep and things of that nature, supplementation, and I come at this from an athletic perspective, but together combined as dads,
Yeah.
we're living this. We've been through this youth process. We're at the point now where you're about to enter into the college world with your son Pearson. So I thought we would start by me asking you. It really, when I'm talking with parents, see if you agree. It's all about the lens that each family is looking through. In other words, most young parents are seeing a lens maybe 1 or 2 years older than their student athlete. And they're thinking, okay, is that what we have to be? I mean, in reality, more parents need to focus on, okay, this is what is currently in our, windshield, our viewpoint right now today. And so when you were working with Pearson, let's start when Pearson was a freshman. Let's talk a little bit about when he was a freshman in high school. Let's talk about some of the attributes that you were able to check off and say, okay, he has this, but he's going to need this and this. Talk about Pearson and your sons as athletes at those younger ages in high school.
Yeah, Walter. Pearson, as I look at him as a freshman, uh, he's always hit well. He's seen the ball well. He's always made good contact. Hit pretty much anytime he went to play with the team. 350 or better. But we had to be honest with ourselves and recognize what is some of the things he needs to work on, and the biggest thing was size and strength. And I mean, you look at your younger boys as a freshman, even if you go down to 7th and 8th grade, and usually your bigger, stronger boys are going to be the ones that give them bigger impact in the game. So we had to check the box and say, do we need to work on this area? And both of us definitely agreed that this is something we got to put a lot of attention to. One of the boxes that he did check that a lot of these parents need to ask themselves is he willing to do the work? Does he really want it? I didn't have to tell Pearson to go hit extra in the cage. I didn't have to tell him to go play some long catch and strengthen his arm. I didn't have to tell him to do a lot of those things. So, the biggest thing that I looked at is Pearson had the desire. We gotta ask ourselves as parents, is this something we want for the athlete, or is this something the athlete really wants? Does he have the desire to practice when I'm not telling him? Does he have the desire? Because if they have the desire, we're going to teach those boxes that need to be checked that maybe we need to put some focus on. And Pearson's really the biggest limiting factor for him was the strength and getting bigger, and we definitely recognized that early. And, he was not the best when you look at, if you would have come as a recruiter, like in your world, you see athletes every day. If I'd have said, Walter, come down, let's watch Pearson play freshman year, you'd have slapped him on the back and said, hey, he's a good little ball player. But you probably wouldn't have dreamed of him, hitting as many home runs as he hit his senior year and, going on to play, at a big D1 JUCO. So, I guess my biggest message to the parents is being honest with themselves. What you just said is very important. What boxes do we need to check, and what boxes do we need to focus on before we can check them later on?
I think a lot of times I'm going to talk to parents of those eighth graders that are rising freshmen and those sophomores that are rising juniors in high school. I think if I could make a suggestion to parents, it would be begin to allow your athlete to do two things. One, stack days. Don't get so far ahead of yourself that you're in that, okay, what is this going to look like as a junior or senior and recruiting and August 1st and all these timelines? Those are not relevant. They're just not part of the day to day for your student athlete, nor should they be. I always say to parents, there are two time periods where the student athletes will really kind of put their input. And that's when they're hungry. And that's where it's like, what time are we leaving? When they're younger, they don't have the keys to the car and they're at the mercy of mom and dad. So much like in your household, athletics has to be about, okay, the food, the nutrition, the supplementation, the strength. You have to really go out and get them to identify where they are weak as well as where they are strong. So the first part of this entire process, over and above skill set development, is about the who are the athletes, what type of athletes are they capable of becoming? Do they have foot speed? Are they explosive? Are they athletic and mobile? What positions are they capable of playing with regard to versatility? You have to identify that, and a lot of that ties into what are they passionate about? Meaning, if I asked my boys when they were younger, what did you want for dinner? Typically, it was always a pasta, meatballs, or grilled cheese, or a chicken quesadilla. It wasn't really expansive. But now, if I ask them as adults, it's a whole different menu that they rattle off. I'll have a filet, I'll have asparagus. They look at their life very differently. So we can't expect younger athletes to verbalize, hey, I want to be able to work on my scapular, I want to work on my decelerators and my rear. They don't know any of that. So therefore, you must begin to identify, does my student athlete have a strong passion to be an active participant? And when I say that, parents will always look at me and ask me, well, is there any other, what are you asking me about active participant? And I'll say, well, some athletes just want to go around. They just want to go for the ride. They want to be a spectator in the dugout. They want to wear the jersey. They want to get the gear and they want to say, hey, I'm on that train. I'm on team X with the cool logo and the cool name. Or the other guys are like, I don't really care who I'm playing for. I want to know that I'm trending, I'm getting better, I'm getting my reps, because after all, repetitions are the only way for young athletes to absorb retention. And whether that is nutrition, supplementation, strength training, and obviously skill set development. The next thing I have to ask you, Jeremy, because you obviously get a lot of athletes that are always asking you, how is this going to work if I gain 20 pounds? How is this going to work? That I really want you to explain to parents, when you see an athlete go up by 20 or 30 pounds over the course of an off season or the course of a winter leading into the spring, typically they see monumental gains. And what does that do for the confidence of a
Yeah.
student athlete?
Yeah, I mean, it just it opens their eyes to what is really possible is the biggest thing. One of my favorite sayings that I heard a long time ago that I over and over use when I'm working with athletes and parents is, your athlete does not know what they don't know. So I can tell them over and over, the physics behind every 15 pounds you gain, it can add 5 to 7 miles per hour to your swing. It's going to make the ball fly 25, 30 feet further. I can say that over and over, Walter, but until it comes to reality, that's when it really gets that athlete saying, okay, this is happening in my body. This is happening. I've got a young man that's down in Georgia, 14-year-old, has gained about 20 pounds since December. He was sharing with me, he goes to one of those machines that it tracks your swing per mile per hour. And he goes, you told me this was going to happen, Coach Fouts. But now that it's happening, man, it just drives me to keep working harder. It just fuels me to look at that breakfast and say, thank God I get to eat this breakfast again to get bigger and stronger. And what it really does too is it encourages the mom and dad. You know how hard it is for us mom and dads to continue to pour in what we are pouring in to our athletes in the kitchen and cleaning dishes and taking them to practice and all these things. And so many times us as parents, it's easy to question, is this really going to happen? And then when you as a parent, you say, hey, this one change we made in nutrition of gaining 15 to 20 pounds is not only separating him from the other competition, from how far he's hitting the ball, the increase in his arm strength, the ability for him to, just get into the batter's box with confidence that he's going to take the ball and drive it into the gap. It excites the mom and dad because they're like, man, he's actually even taking out the trash when I'm not asking him to. He's actually turning off the video games and doing some arm care in the garage at night. He's actually grabbing the bat and calling the buddy and saying, let's go to the cage. And so it just totally changes everything, Walter. That confidence is one of the things that I say. And I know you're big into academics as I am. It allows them to see, okay, this is something I focused on, and it made that big of a gain. How about if I focus on my academics? How about if I focus on just being a better leader for my teammates? And it just totally unlocks that potential and makes them recognize a little bit of focus. I love how you say just looking through that windshield, not looking in the side windshield or the back, of the back of the windshield. Let's just look right here. And it totally changes everything because of a routine and focus. And that's something that cannot really be described by me. We could be on here for 30 to 45 minutes, but it turns them into a different person.
Well, when we come back from this quick break, we're going to talk a little bit about the biggest hurdle for parents to allow your student athletes to deal with that sophomore and junior year. We'll be right back.
All proteins are not the same. I encourage you to choose a grass-fed whey protein. The cattle have a cleaner diet, grazing on natural grass, which is going to mean that it's going to have higher branched chain amino acids, also your omegas and your CLAs. I'm telling you, it matters from a recovery standpoint. Choose the best protein and you're going to see the best gains and the best recovery. I'm telling you, athletes, make a wise choice because it matters what you put in your body.
Okay, welcome back. And, here is the big secret. And I always tell parents when I get done explaining this particular aspect and dynamic of your progression with your student athlete, you're not going to like me for about 4 months. And that is, a lot of times I will tell parents, you must put your student athletes in situations where failure is going to be a big part of that experience. Meaning, most parents are going into that 13U, 14U, 15U, 16U, and they just go into this year by year progression. And you've heard me talk about this, Jeremy, ad nauseum, but that sophomore in high school should not be at the 15U level, nor should they really be at the 16U level. That's the age where you want them to be swimming in the big boy deep end of the pool or the ocean. And I always will say to parents, that is the time that you will discover whether your athlete truly has the passion, has the grit, has the determination. What I call that gut check moment where they say, okay, I have to figure this out. Because if I am going to play in college, I need to be able to play against those 17 to 20-year-olders, because that is who I will be competing with at that collegiate level when we're all 20 to 24, 25 years old, depending upon level. Have you ever had a situation where Pearson or either of your boys really got into this over their head moment where they began to look around going, I'm not in the little leagues anymore. I'm kind of in with the sharks and the whales out here?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, Pearson, we played in a big tournament one time and he was playing against guys 2, 3 years older. And, he had some failure and we talked about it in the car. And of course, that's the first thing he brought up. Those kids are 2 to 3 years older than me. You know what I told him, Walter? I said, hey, this is going to be the reality from here on out. You're if you go into college, when you start high school, depending on if you started on varsity as a freshman, which that's hardly happens at Prosper at a 6A school, and he did not. He played freshman ball. But when you go to your sophomore year, you're going to be playing juniors and seniors. When you go to your junior year, you're going to be playing seniors. When you go to college, you're going to be playing guys 2 to 3 years older than you. I hear parents over and over, well, they're playing, they're really young for their grade. Well, at that point, ninth grade on, it does not matter. You've got to get your son or daughter ready to face the competition. And that's why I'm so big on getting their body and mind prepared for that. When they start freshman on, they're pretty much going to be playing at all the time, bigger, stronger, and older kids. And that should be good motivation for them. I call it local versus national, Walter.
Right.
And I know you do this over and over more than any of us. And, I want to ask you, how do you prepare these parents to stop looking just locally, but let them understand that coaches are looking nationally? I mean, how do you explain to the parents that the talent pool is deeper than what these families realize?
Well, I always try to explain to parents, everybody wants to swim in the local pool because it's basically convenient. You start looking for an ocean, you start looking for the bigger areas of water, you start dealing with more issues, lifeguards, and, all kinds of other ancillary stuff that you concern yourself with as a parent. But when it comes to athletics, the lifeguards, which are the coaches, they're not looking at the local pool. They're not looking in the shallow end, and they're really kind of casting their eyes onto roster management on a year-to-year basis. Gone are the days where college coaches are constructing rosters for 3-4 years out. They're constructing rosters basically over a 12 to 18-month window. And so what I will always say to parents is this: at some point, your student athlete is going to be old enough to drive. And when that moment comes, I want you to understand that you can insure the car, you can put gas in the car, you can even make sure they have a GPS in the car. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to determine where they're going, when they're going. They're going to determine who they're picking up along the way. So if you use that metaphor as it pertains to college, what destination do you think your student athlete is going to drive that car when it comes to college, when it comes to possible options and opportunities? Because you might think they're going to this destination, but in reality, they're going someplace entirely different. And when it comes to evaluation of talent, most parents are stuck in today. In college coaches, you cannot help them today. So they must be able to see through your student athlete a certain type of temperament, a certain type of athleticism, and most of all, the big boy world is projectability. Now, every parent will push back, Jeremy, when they talk to me and they want to throw back in my face, well, who's going to develop my student athlete? Who is going to be responsible for the development of my student athlete? And I will say to them, your student athlete is going to determine their development. Well, this coach is really militant and he screams and he yells. And, now that they're in school, it's a whole different story, because it was a great guy that recruited my son or daughter. And now it's this, Sergeant Hulka, and they're yelling and screaming. I'm like, here's the thing. You're worried about the tone of the message when you should be worried about the foundation of the message. Because if there's a message that's trying to be conveyed to your student athlete, that means the coach or the coaches have a genuine interest and concern of the well-being and the development of your student athlete. But your student athlete has to be accountable. Are they getting up in the morning? Are they driving their car to the weight room? Are they driving their car to go get extra reps at the cage? Are they throwing into a net when the weather's inclement? Meaning, coaches are looking, if your student athlete is going to be a graduate in the class of 2027, a college coach is going to evaluate your student athlete based on how they think your student athlete is going to be in February of 2028. So between now and 2028, if you're not giving the coach, the lifeguards or the coaches a progression, like, oh, okay, he's getting bigger. Oh, okay, he's getting faster. Okay, he's getting much more skilled. The body language is maturing, things of that nature. That goes into recruiting. And so it's a great question that you asked there, Jeremy, because a lot of times when a parent will say to me, how do I know if my student athlete has the ability to play at school X? And I will always say, unless you have allowed them to fail, unless you have given them the keys to their car, your car, and independently know that when no one is looking, they are going out and working. When no one is looking or asking, they are getting stronger. They are doing their meal prep. It's not you. It's not mom. It's not a sibling. It's them. It's accountability for their futures. And once you know that has taken place, I mean, you and I have talked to parents together here over the last several weeks where they've said, boy, oh boy, my student athletes started a meal plan when they were 12 or 13. Now they cook their own meals. They have their own, own strength plan. They execute that strength plan. They do their own reps. When you allow your student athletes to take an active role with regard to their development, then and only then will you know, like, okay, my student athlete's now ready for that interaction with the college coach because they're on the path. They're showing progression. They're showing accountability. They're essentially stacking days, as we repeatedly say over and over. Here's one thing I would love for you to share, if you could, real quick, and that is when you get a call from a parent and they say, oh, my son's a senior going into his senior year next year. He's a 2027. He's 6'2", 6'1", and the following sentence comes out and he's 157. You tell me, what's the first thing you think when you hear the words, and he's 157?
I mean, honestly, I think we got a lot of work to do and we got a very short time to do it, Walter.
Not a lot of runway. And then parents will say, well, what can we do? Is there a pill? Is there a powder? Is there something I can buy? You can't buy time.
No.
So when you start, one of the questions that you can answer is, parents will always say, well, who cooks the meals? Like, who's going to do all this meal prep? Who's going to, here's a novel idea. Do it together. Make it a family event. But honest to goodness, in your heart of hearts, how long does it typically take a student athlete to see that your processes work and begins to like push them and propel them? Is it a month? Is it 3 months? What's the time period where parents can say, oh man, Jeremy, this is really, I'm starting to see it work? What's the time frame?
I would say less than 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
You know, when I first start work with an athlete, Walter, I have them the first 7 days, they text me every day their weight. Okay. I do that for 2 reasons. Number one, I do that to hold them accountable. I recognize really quick if they forget to weigh, you know what that tells me? They didn't do the work the day before. And number two, the reason I do that is I explain to them the ups and downs of the weights. You know, I explained to them, okay, did you drink your water and eat your food? Well, I missed my water. Well, that's why your weight is down. You know, if their weight is staying the same or if it decreased and they ate all their food and drink all their water, then I tell them, hey, we might have had a glycogen reset. And I explain to them. But I know that if in 7 days I can get them off to a fast track really quick of seeing that this thing works, then the second week, it's just like clockwork. They're like, okay, I get up in the morning, I weigh, I go to the bathroom, or I go to the bathroom, I weigh, I send Coach Fouts my results, or I log them in my notes. Okay, this is working. Now I'm up 1.5 pounds the first week, or 2 pounds the first week, depending on what I have them on a surplus. And then I tell them, okay, if we got 1.5 pounds of gain the first week, I ask them the question, can we do that 10 more times? And they're like, well, why not? I did it once. I'm like, okay, we do that 10 more times. That's 15 pounds. And then it starts clicking in their mind because a lot of times a youth athlete will look at 1.5 pounds and it don't really mean a lot to them. But if we tell them, let's do this thing called math and let's times it by 10, that's 15 pounds. Then they're like, man, that was the magic number that Coach Fouts was talking about, the ball flying 25 feet further. But usually within 2 weeks, if an athlete goes to work, I have them locked in and there is no looking back, period.
Well, one of the things I want parents to know is when we're doing this podcast, we get a myriad of different questions and responses, but we want to encourage you, look in the description below. If you have a question for Coach Jeremy with regard to nutrition, supplementation, meal prep, any of those types of, you must just send along an email, send along a message, DM via social media. I hear them talk to parents. I talk to parents that are working with athletes and they can't believe how quickly Coach Jeremy gets back to them. It's important when you have a question, don't waste time sticking at a plateau. Always try to be moving the needle forward. If you have something that you want either one of us to discuss, a question, a topic that you feel is relevant to your current situation or your particular student athlete, I encourage you to send that along here. Comment in the video below. Send us your question, and we'll turn it into a topic that Coach Jeremy and I can answer throughout the year. The process. This is about your process. It's simply a message that allows you to continue to push your student athlete in the direction that they desire to move in, as well as to hopefully achieve their goals and dreams with regard to not only the high school varsity athletic, but also potentially college and beyond. Jeremy, thanks you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to our next discussion.
You're very welcome, Walter. My last message I'd say to parents, the skills get you noticed. You know, you and I talk about, you got to have good skills, but physical development gets you recruited.
It's
So
your calling card.
parents, yep.